Welcome, selected ones. When heaven files a case, even silence is proof. Allow it to sink in, as God is not speaking right now. He's pacing the courtroom of heaven, robes swinging, eyes blazing. The gavel is about to fall. Not on you, but on them. They thought they could injure an innocent soul and then walk away, as if the universe was blind. They thought that spiritual offenses had no consequences. Emotional assassins may escape unharmed, but that is the truth. In ancient law, providing false evidence resulted in more than just dishonor. It was just the punishment they desired for the innocent. So what happens when hundreds of people join forces to oppose a single chosen soul, and heaven decides it's time to settle the score? You got it, mass spiritual expulsion. You aren't playing fairly. It is functioning nicely. Let's be honest, some of these folks are going to learn the hard way that karma is more than just a notion. It's God's legal assistant. Oh, and if you've ever wondered whether God takes betrayal personally, especially when it affects one of his own, fasten your seatbelt. Because we'll see what happens when divine judgment is no longer postponed but becomes a menace. Let's get to it. Number 1, they did not just lie to you. They lied to the divine about you. They did not just lie to you. They lied to the divine about you. This is why God is upset. This was not typical slander. This was not just someone raving out of jealousy or hate. It was a spiritual onslaught disguised as petty gossip. They opened their mouths and rewrote your whole story, figuring no one would fact-check it, not realizing the author was listening. They tried to make you seem guilty when you were nothing but modest, loyal, and quiet. Worse, they felt they were powerful enough to persuade heaven. They weaponized words like daggers. They did not remark, "This person has hurt me." They just said that this individual is a problem. They didn't just critique what you did. They questioned who you are. And there is a difference. One is human conflict. The second technique is identity assassination. These people misrepresented your name, ridiculed your profession, and portrayed your personality in ways that compromised your dignity, all while laughing as if it were nothing. That's why this goes beyond karma. This is now personal to God. They didn't just offend you. They ridiculed God's decision to choose you. When someone undermines a specific person's reputation, they are not just conducting a smear campaign. They resist divine judgment. You did not appoint yourself. You didn't anoint yourself. God did it. They then approached you like you were a random person. They entered a hazardous region. They thought they were talking about you to others, but they were really speaking out against you in front of the person who sealed you. It's like walking into a courtroom and lying about an innocent person, hoping the judge won't notice. They didn't realize that paradise doesn't need lawyers. God acts as a witness, judge, and verdict. When lies are spread about the innocent, divine judgment does not need defense. It evokes a strong response. You surely didn't say anything. You stayed kind. You persisted. They forgot that while you were silent, God was recording. Every incorrect phrase they thought they had forgotten is now being used to reveal their own spiritual consequences. This isn't just punishment. This is a fantastic adjustment. And it's already in motion. Number 2, they did not mistreat you. They insulted God's selection process. They didn't just mistreat you. They insulted God's selection process. That is what makes this unique. This wasn't only about personal resentment, envy, or miscommunication. It was deeper. They were not disappointed by your personality. They were upset that you were chosen while they were not. It's not that you did something wrong. Your whole existence as a chosen one represented spiritual rejection. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't understand why God selected someone like you over them. You did not fit the image they had in their imaginations. You were not loud, polished, appealing, or damaged enough to fulfill their criterion for worth. They waited for God to choose someone whom they could manage, laud, or tolerate. Instead, he chose you. Quiet, extremely attentive, flawed yet committed. This messed with their ego. So rather of embracing God's decision, they tried to undermine it by tearing you apart. They claimed to have the ability to reverse God's will. They expected you to stop calling when they passed judgment on you. They believed that if enough people disliked you, heaven would change its mind. This is how delusional pride develops when people think they are more righteous than God. However, when they assaulted you, they revealed why they were not chosen. Because a trustworthy servant of God renders decisions that do not generate dispute. They respect them, even if they don't understand. You presented a spiritual threat not via what you said or did, but because of who you were. You proved that God favors the unseen, unnoticed, and misunderstood. You offered a stark contrast to their religious rituals, fake humility, and self-proclaimed importance. Instead of repenting, they retaliated. Unfortunately, it is too late to undo what has occurred. They did not just dispute your assignment. They questioned the person who had allotted it. And heaven doesn't take this lightly. They mocked the throne with their actions. They refused God's command. And now he's responding. Not in words, but in fury. Because when people try to violate divine order, they are not just exposed. They were corrected in front of everyone. Third, they wanted blood, not truth, since your innocence demonstrated their guilt. They didn't want the truth. They wanted blood. That is what made it so risky. Your innocence was not simply discarded. They actively dislike it. You were not a risk since you had done nothing wrong. You were dangerous because you didn't. You were not disruptive, contentious, or dishonest enough to fit into their strategy. So instead of leaving you alone, they tried to destroy you. And not softly either. They did it loudly, boldly, and unanimously, as if your death was their reward. Your purity made them uncomfortable. Your calmness irritated their demons. Your ability to remain polite, grounded, and indifferent in the face of their onslaught proved how corrupt they had become. They were unable to handle it. You didn't have to clap back or prove anything. Standing there with clean hands revealed all they had been hiding behind. Fake grins, invented tales, and coerced collaborations. They needed you to fall. They wanted you to snap. Because remaining anchored would have jeopardized their whole plan, they needed something terrible about you to legitimize the filth they were already drowning in. But nothing stuck. You didn't give them what they wanted. And it drove them nuts. So they behaved like broken people do. They lied. They exaggerated. They created drama where none existed. They turned their guilt into a trial. And let us be honest, not all of them were intended to harm you. They planned to silence you, destroy your reputation, reduce your influence, and cancel your call. All because they couldn't handle the fact that you walked with a sense of favor. They never earned. It wasn't personal. It was spiritual. And when someone is spiritually out of sync, they will constantly want to crucify what is good in order to feel better about what is wrong. But God saw every twisted word. Every argument occurs behind closed doors. Every trap is set. And now He is answering. Not because you are perfect, but because you stayed innocent in the face of clear hostility. They were searching for dirt, but God found a clean soul. And now He's presenting a persuasive argument for justice. Number 4, God kept silent. He wasn't absent. Instead, He was collecting receipts. They saw God's silence as agreement. They interpreted His silence as disinterest. Or worse, He agreed with them. They failed to realize, however, that God's quiet does not indicate that He is doing nothing. It's because He documents everything. Every muttered slur, phony smile, each lie said behind your back. Heaven did not disregard it. Heaven was archiving it. You were not ignored. You were kept under observation. God did not act immediately because He saw that the truth had to be presented without assistance. If He had stopped the storm too soon, many would have questioned your authority. They'd have assumed you were rescued rather than good. But now there's no question. You didn't just tolerate it. You stayed clean throughout. And while they were busy setting traps, insulting you, and waiting for your doom, God was preparing an unexpected court case. Divine judgment does not always come down like thunder. It can build up like a wave. It is quiet, heavy, and impossible to flee once it hits. God has not forgotten what they did. He didn't overlook how they treated you. He was only giving them time to repent. Not because they deserved it, but because you did. Because the compassion He offered them was His way of honoring your feelings for some of them, even if they didn't deserve it. However, that moment is gone. What's coming is not emotional revenge. It is a legal adjustment at the highest level. And it will be correct because God operates quietly and without confusion. It comes with receipts. Nothing will be strained. Nothing will be left out. Everyone involved will get a portion. Those who felt that if God existed, he would have stopped me, are about to experience what occurs when God responds unexpectedly. You weren't forgotten. You were guarded in slow motion. And now the judge is standing. Case closed. Number 5. They thought they were testing you, but they were on trial the whole time. They really believe they were testing you. You have patience, strength, and character. They probed your wounds, pulled out your triggers, and waited for you to collapse, lash out, or lose control. They did not realize you were never the one being tested. They symbolized your vitality, receptivity, and tranquility. It all exposed them. Heaven took notes. God did not let persecution decide your survival. He knew you would. You were meant for this. The true intention was to disclose them, to show how much evil they were ready to consider, say, and do while assuming there would be no consequences. Your presence was a mirror. You have expressed your jealousy. They tried to dress up as nervous. You exposed what they called protection. You were enraged. They tried to hide by providing incorrect information. They may have walked away. They could have checked themselves. They may have chosen humility. Instead, they chose savagery. They chose it with full knowing. They passed up every opportunity to express their sympathy. They weaponized every flaw you revealed. They failed the test by demonstrating that they prioritize accuracy above justice. That's why God stepped in. Not because you couldn't take it, but because they couldn't count on your presence. They assumed it was a game. They had no notion it was an investigation. They believed they were monitoring your response, but God was really watching theirs. How far will they go to get you down? How far will they go in portraying you as the problem? How much vengeance will they unleash in the name of truth? That was what heaven wanted to see. Now that all is clear, judgment is coming. Not an emotional response, but a spiritual responsibility. They weren't exposing you. They were revealing themselves. The mask has been removed forever. What they mistook for your breakdown was really theirs under celestial investigation. And now they're the ones being sentenced. Not because you asked for it, but because they earned it. You were the 6th lamb to be slain. However, God forbids it this time in order to assure their redemption. They treated you like a sacrifice, as if the pain they caused on you would somehow cleanse them, as if breaking, humiliating, and isolating you were sufficient. Perhaps they'd be more comfortable with their own darkness. They associated their guilt with your name, convinced themselves that their acts were justified. They weren't just cruel. They were calculated. They banded together, spread lies, and claimed to send you to the flames. It was some kind of essential cleanup. Their goals did not include redemption. Only ego and only evil. They told everyone you deserved it. They turned your silence into guilt, your might into arrogance, and your wisdom into disobedience. They made you a scapegoat for whatever they couldn't manage, understand, or dominate. They did not wish to heal. They searched for a target. So they selected someone who had never fought dirty. The person who continues to forgive. The one who had several opportunities to clap back but did not. You were innocent. And this is why you are dangerous to them. However, this time, heaven will not let it go. God is not using tragedy as a lesson in suffering for our benefit. This isn't about wearing a cross to help people find grace. The door is closed. They did something unholy. It was unfriendly. Your sorrow is no longer being used for their salvation. It's being offered as evidence. What they did to you incurred a spiritual charge. Heaven always gathers. They thought they could use you up, drain your energy, damage your reputation, and escape unscathed. However, they did not expect such a stunning turnaround. God does not dismiss what has happened. He's not employing religious terminology. He calls it what it is: unjust, nasty, abusive, and entirely responsible. There will be no respite for those who found solace in your pain. They didn't just mistreat you. They abused the soul God had given them. And now, the misery they tried to forget is in the spotlight. Heaven is revealing every hidden scheme, murmured malice, every silent witness. Justice isn't coming. It has already come. Number 7. They built their reputation by ruining yours. Heaven is now reversing its currency. They didn't only ruin your reputation. They used it. They turned your struggle into a story. Your flaws become entertainment, and your recovery journey becomes a farce. The more they skewed your image, the more attention they gained. The more they humiliated you, the more powerful they felt. They increased their status by using your misery, which they referred to as truth-telling, venting, or just being honest. Nonetheless, they gained from your failure. They never expected there would be a cost. They gained sympathy, connections, and confidence by turning people against you. They presented themselves as the victim, hero, and wise one, while damaging your reputation behind closed doors. But here's something they didn't get. God keeps receipts, and heaven benefits more than just the innocent. It exposes the manipulators. Everything they accomplished via humiliation has now been reversed. The credibility they stole in your name is starting to erode. People are waking up. The truth, which was previously concealed under layers of deception, is now surfacing without your assistance. Your reputation is being rebuilt spontaneously, without revenge or retaliation, by divine intervention. God has the microphone. The audience, who formerly liked your mockers, is now apprehensive. The applause has died down. The story is no longer accurate since the fruit does not lie, and those who intended to harm you are now facing serious penalties. Their serenity has gone, their favor is waning, and their relationships are straining because what they built was never genuine. It was founded on lies. You do not need to defend yourself. You do not need to explain. Your stillness is not a sign of weakness. It is a strategy. Because, while they performed, God prepared a divine reversal. And now their greatest shame is happening in the same locations where they previously sought to humiliate you. That is not a coincidence. That's God guaranteeing that everyone knows the difference between genuine favor and acquired notoriety. Number 8, heaven was never neutral. It waited for the scales to tip. You imagine God was silent because he was trying to decide who was right. But there was never a question. Heaven was never neutral. God did not pace the floors of eternity, wondering whether you earned it. He witnessed everything from the start. Every lie, every plan, every time they smiled at you while stabbing you in the back. His silence did not reflect hesitation. It was a strategy. He was allowing them to display their whole hand. He allowed them to go as far as they could, not because he was confused, but because they were. They thought they were winning. They mistook heaven's patience for approbation. They thought that since lightning had not struck the interim, they were okay. However, they were ignorant that heavenly time does not function in the same manner as the human ego. God wasn't rushing to hush them. He was enabling them to create the same rope from which they would hang their credibility. The longer they chatted, the more they revealed and exploited, the deeper the trap became. Now the scales have tipped. God never compared your worth to theirs. This was previously decided. He was considering how much injustice he could bear before responding. And now the measure is full. The gavel is coming down. The verdict is plain. It's rage. Not emotional, but lovely. The kind that rearranges everything. The kind that dismantles bogus power structures and exposes every falsehood used to further the wrong cause. This is irrevocable. No rebranding. No, all of us have made errors. Speech may reverse prior deeds. They harmed a reputation, peace, and soul. Everything is returning to them in twofold. Not because you desired it or begged for punishment, but because God waited. While we waited, he made justice clear. You no longer need to back up your case. Heaven has already ruled in your favor. And now, the same silence that once protected them is about to publicly, comprehensively, and forever condemn them. Number 9, they were not battling you. They were hostile to the version of you that God was going to reveal. They weren't battling you. Not really. They were terrified of the version of you that they thought was on the way. You were healed by your future self. That anointed, elevated, unstoppable version of yourself who will reveal whatever lie they tell in light of who you really are. They saw some of your potential. They worried rather than rejoiced. Because if you become the person God predicted you would be, they would be exposed not just as liars, but also as insecure, manipulative cowards. They acted immediately. They tried to assassinate you before the ascension. They attacked your name before your platform gained prominence. They disseminated lies, misrepresented facts, and incited conflict in order to undermine your reputation before the public saw the outcomes. They did not merely intend to damage you. They were trying to obliterate the future. But this isn't what they expected. God let them. They continued without being disturbed by God, not because he agreed, but because he knew something that the others didn't. He recognized that any attempt to bury you would just create the scene. Every lie would become fuel. Each betrayal would be revealed. And now that they've exhausted every method, God is promoting you loudly, publicly, and unabashedly. Your ascension is the answer. Here's the reaction. It is a question of judgment. God didn't clap back. He created you. You showed that no weapon designed against you was effective. There is no deception, conspiracy, or betrayal. And now your promotion does more than just recognize you. It condemns them. Not wrath, but consequences. Because when people see you succeed despite the defamation thrown upon your name, they will accept the truth. The lies were not compelling enough since the favor was real. Nothing upsets your opponents more than seeing you become invincible. Number 10. They saw your generosity as weakness, which was their downfall. They believed you weren't fighting back because you couldn't. They saw your generosity as weakness. They mistook your calm, composed, and elegant manner for weakness, uneasiness, or self-doubt. They never comprehended that your silence was not consent. It was a spiritual practice. It was a great alignment. You did not spare them because they were untouchable. You spared them because you felt safe. You had every chance to retaliate. You had enough evidence to expose them and receipts to burn down the whole circus. You may have matched their intensity while embarrassing them in turn. But your soul responded, "Don't." Something cried out, "Stand still. This is not your battle. Let God handle it." So you did. You saw them laugh, rejoice, and brag as if they had done something, while heaven saw every act of restraint as righteousness on your behalf. They were too arrogant to grasp reality. They determined that there were no imminent consequences. They got away with it. This is exactly what pride does. It blinds people to God's patience and convinces them they are invincible. However, compassion means approval, and waiting does not entail denial. Mercy is God postponing judgment so that people might repent. However, when they use the delay to increase their evil, they are ignorant that they are slowly, smugly, and in front of an audience building their own grave. The wait is finally over. The sky is no longer holding back. The restriction that was put on them has been lifted. And what's coming has more than just repercussions. It is clarity. People will learn what was hidden. Those who laughed with them will grow to mistrust everything. Their bonds will vanish. Their remarks will ultimately work against them. Because when compassion ends, exposing begins. And when exposure begins, so do the stupid. They weren't unbreakable. They were just being rescued because of you. But now that heaven has released the case, their protection is gone. You never had to destroy them. All you had to do was reject them. And now survival dictates their fate. A number. They said God would do nothing until they realized his delay was a death sentence. They really believed that God would do nothing. They mocked your faith. They laughed at your tears. They joyously sang your name, certain that they had silenced heaven with their lives. And when no lightning hit, no doors slammed shut, and you didn't fight back, they became smug and arrogant, certain that God was either asleep or uncaring. They misunderstood cosmic delay with divine passivity, which sealed their doom. They failed to see that God's delays are never due to ambiguity. It's because he is gaining weight. Thunder does not explode. When the sky darkens, it waits. It evolves. It rumbles under the surface, extending across time, waiting for the ideal moment to strike so that the whole continent may hear it. That is how judgment moves. It seems to do more than simply startle people. It shows up to change the mood. They thought they defeated the system. They argued that if God existed, he would have done something by now. But God was doing something. He was watching. He was recording. He was giving them the opportunity to remedy their mistakes, repent, and humble themselves. Instead of backing down, they went farther. They ridiculed harder. They rallied more people. They did not only sin. They recruited. God, in his love, continued to wait. However, the delay did not benefit them. It was for yours. So when the gavel finally dropped, no one could say you wished for it. Nobody could blame you since you didn't need to move a finger. The thunder's echoes are now coming in. Everything they achieved in secret has now come to light. Those who formerly celebrated their evil are now backing away. Their laughter has faded into silence. Their confidence has dissipated into doubt. They didn't expect God to show up in this manner. Not quiet or slow, but final. This is not a negotiation. This is vengeance. Not because you requested it, but because heaven authorized it. The God they thought was ignoring you is now the one they can't escape. The wait, which they perceived for safety, really enabled their judgment to develop. Now the storm has arrived, and they are standing in the thunder that they said would never come. A number. Your quiet did not indicate weakness. It was a legal strategy for the court of heaven. Your silence wasn't a loss. It wasn't a weakness. It wasn't passivity. It was a strategy. Not in the court of public opinion, but in the courts of heaven. While they shouted at you, they lied about you and misinterpreted everything you said, you kept your composure. Not because you didn't know what to say, but because you knew who was looking. You saw something that most people ignore. Sometimes the loudest argument is given in quiet. Every time you chose peace over retaliation, you were building a legal case. Not on earth, but in the unseen realm. What they did to you wasn't insignificant. This was not a trivial issue. It was calculated, consistent, and in some cases, cruel beyond words. However, rather of combating evil, you chose to stay pure. You walked away rather than applauding. You kept your head up while they tried to conceal your identity. You cried but did not blaspheme. You had a breakdown in private but did not act out in public. And with each decision you made to keep your integrity, you provided heaven with further spiritual evidence. Restraint speaks volumes. Your silence recorded every atrocity in real time. Every sigh, every night. You couldn't sleep. Every second you held your lips was recorded in a treasured file, including your name. The case has now reached heaven's courts. The judge does not dispute his choice. God is acting for you right now because you are silent. He's not coming in because you shouted loud enough. He's coming in because your silence exposed who you and they are. Your quiet wasn't empty. It was all about obedience. It was trust. And now it's your weapon. They believed you were disqualified, yet heaven used it to qualify you for divine intervention. They thought you lost. They thought you were done. But heaven saw something they didn't. A soul that refused to succumb, and a spirit strong enough to trust in God even when it hurts. Your vindication will not arrive quickly. It is legally justified. Heaven isn't only protecting you emotionally, it protects you legally. The case has been examined. The conclusion is clear, and it will be loud enough to drown out any falsehoods they have ever spoken. A number. They try to write you off. God is now rewriting history with your name in gold. They believe they had the last say on your story. They reason that by removing your name from talks, altering events, and making just enough believable lies, you would gradually disappear into the background. They plan to treat you as a footnote in a tale they controlled. So they used rumors to hide the truth. They removed your name from the rooms you helped design. They said just enough poison to influence public opinion. And for a while, it seemed to work. People became cold and doors closed. Your integrity was questioned, and you were avoided. However, there is an unexpected plot twist. God has editorial control over your story. Heaven does not need their consent to modify the script. Every chapter they attempted to delete is being restored, not simply cured, but also redeemed. Your name is not only being cleaned, it's being crowned. Because when God fixes, He does more than just replace what was broken. He raises it in front of those who tried to destroy it. You see, this isn't your usual vindication. This is excellent editing. God isn't just editing a few pages. He's rewriting the whole history. The pen is dipped in justice. The ink is imbued with dignity. They sought to delete specific instances, which are now the reason you are being promoted. The exact name they intended to tarnish is now permanently etched in gold. Here's the best part. Heaven does not ask your enemies for permission. They do not have a vote. They are not permitted to edit. They cannot include footnotes or disclaimers in the miracle. God is writing in your life. All they can do now is watch God raise the name they promised would never rise again. Your tale is not complete. It was just interrupted. However, God is restarting the tale. The next portion is written with pride, dignity, and unwavering strength. People who try to write you out will find your name etched in chambers that they will never be able to access again. That's not vengeance. This is what occurs when heaven reveals the truth. A number. They tried to invalidate you. Now God is demanding. They freely validate you. They thought they could get away with treating you like nothing. Then continue discreetly. They brazenly discredited you. They seek to establish peace in the midst of the darkness. They spread lies in large numbers, yet want to apologize in small groups. But God will not tolerate it. Not this time. Not after everything they had done. What they don't grasp is that repentance involves more than simply feeling bad. It is about making things right. They did not just harm your feelings. They damaged your reputation. They damaged your reputation in situations when you couldn't defend yourself. And today, God is not asking for quiet regret. He is demanding public restitution. The same voices who offended you will be expected to address the issue with same enthusiasm. They mocked you openly. They should now be happy to respect you. They persuaded people to look down on you. They'll have to point those people back at you and confess they were wrong. Shame is incompatible with spiritual justice. It's about divine balance. What was done in public must be healed in public. Anything less would constitute incomplete remorse. And heaven doesn't provide partial healing. This goes beyond vindication. This is a spiritual transaction. It is a kind of repair. Respect, opportunity, and reputation have been taken from you and must be returned with interest. God isn't playing with your name. He saw how ashamed you felt. He saw you were quiet, calm, and polite as they pulled you. And suddenly the gavel has fell. Heaven doesn't want a private apology. It seeks popular approbation. And they'll have a choice. Restore the components they removed from your photo, or face the judgment that comes when God has to do it for them. Regardless, you will be acknowledged loudly, clearly, and powerfully. Because heaven does more than merely repair reputations. It also restores dignity. When God steps in, He does more than just defend your reputation. He establishes it. Allow them to talk. Allow them to twist their story, change the chronology, and claim innocence. Because at the end of the day, there was a judge who saw everything. The courts of heaven are no longer on vacation. The gavel has struck. The judgment was inscribed with fire. And the truth. Your truth will speak louder than any falsehood they tried to cover you with. You were not just attacked. You were targeted for your intelligence. You weren't just rejected. You were sacrificed so that their shadows wouldn't seem so dark. They never anticipated this, however. You were chosen not for destruction, but for divine expression. They thought the suffering would kill you. They thought their manipulation would define you. However, they just made you visible. The ashes they tried to bury you with are now the ink God is using to rewrite the next chapter of your life. It's carved with huge gold letters. It is not only about justice. It's about reversal. It's about God altering the stage that they try to set against you and turning it into a platform. Not only to holler, "I told you so," but now you may walk with unambiguous proof that heaven always prevails, even if it takes a little longer than expected. You won't need to dispute. You do not have to clap back. The results will speak louder than any words you might say. So don't shrink. Don't underestimate your worth because others are too broken to see it. God is moving, and He will not come to comfort us. He's coming as an avenger. Not because you begged, but because He is righteous. Kindness always corrects wrongdoing. Your name will be restored. Your story will be reported honestly. And those who thought they could get away with challenging you will either publicly acknowledge the light they intended to extinguish or see firsthand what happens when heaven responds with holy fire. God is not just vindicating you. He is establishing you. So take your hands off the wheel. The selected one. This is no longer your battle. Now it's time for God to shine. And you are the headline. If this message ignited a fire in your heart and spoke to the truth, you have carried it in silence. Don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another word meant just for you. Like this video to show the algorithm that the truth still matters. Leave a comment below. Tell us how this resonated with you, what you've gone through, and how you're conquering it. Your voice might be the affirmation someone else needs. Most importantly, please forward this letter to everyone who has been unfairly judged, mistreated, or silenced. Let them know that heaven is not ignoring their pain. God is preparing for their return. Let us spread divine justice far and broad. We are not just constructing a community. We are creating a movement. And your being here suggests that the chosen are rising. One truth at a time. 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 Truth at a